And this is an emerging technology that's gaining traction as an alternative to existing sanitation technologies like sewers and pit latrines and septic tanks, specifically in very dense urban areas. And I'm the co-founder and executive director of Soil, which is an organization that's been working solely in Haiti since 2006 to design innovative and sustainable approaches to the urban sanitation crisis. And although my work has been restricted to Haiti, I do want to take some time today to talk about the wider sector and introduce the work of some of my amazing partners that are doing this type of work all around the world. So the talk today is going to tell you a little bit about what container-based sanitation is, who are some of the key actors in the sector, why is it that container-based sanitation is starting to gain the interest of institutions and governments around the world. And then I'll give you a little overview of how the whole process works and show you a video of Soil's work so you can really see it in action. And then I'll close with talking a bit about why container-based sanitation is especially well suited to resource recovery. So without further ado, I will show you some toilets, maybe. Yes. So container-based sanitation is an end-to-end service that collects waste hygienically from waterless toilets that are built around sealable, removable containers. And container-based toilets can be designed for household use, as is the case with this Soil toilet, the Ecolock High toilet, or they can be used in public toilets that are more broadly available to the community, as is the case with this beautiful Fresh Life toilet from one of our partners in Kenya, Sanergy. And I want to send a shout out because I saw they're on the webinar today, and I'm very excited that they're here. And I hope they'll only ask me supportive questions. So container-based sanitation, container-based toilets, you know, you hear this and you think container, is that a bucket? Are these bucket toilets? Bucket toilets have been around forever. And it's true that bucket toilet systems were very heavily used in the 19th century. But I think as cities have grown, there's a group of innovative organizations and businesses around the world that are thinking about how can we revisit the bucket toilet and turn it into something totally different. We need to transform its reputation. We need to transform the way that the service functions so that we can actually come up with a viable alternative to flushing our waste down the sewers with water in areas where sewers may never reach. And so in the interest of increasing the legitimacy and really creating standards around container-based sanitation, in 2016, a group of 6 organizations around the world formed the Container Based Sanitation Alliance, with a shared vision of a world where access to dignified, safe, and affordable sanitation is no longer out of reach for families and communities in dense urban areas around the world. And the 6 founding members of the Container Based Sanitation Alliance are Soil in Haiti, X-Runner in Peru, Sanergy and Sanovation in Kenya, Clean Team in Ghana, and Luwat in Madagascar. And we're a relatively new group, and we're really looking forward to increasing our membership in the coming years. And we have some great partners who work together with us and hopefully will be joining the Alliance in the near future. And I think some of them are on the webinar today as well. So I'll give a shout out to Mosan, who have recently launched a project in Guatemala, and also Sanitation First, who are doing some great work in India. And I apologize, I didn't have the organization names of everyone there, so I may be missing others. But I think it's a very exciting, vibrant, and growing movement. So why is container-based sanitation gaining traction? And I think the reason is because the world is changing. And right now we're at this conference in rural Vermont. I grew up in rural upstate New York, and those of us who live in rural areas have seen the exodus that is happening. Small towns are often getting smaller, and where are all of those people going? Well, they're flocking into cities. And so I think one of the primary drivers of this movement towards container-based sanitation is this trend of rapid urbanization. So cities are growing at a staggering rate, and governments are simply unable to keep up with this growth with infrastructure. And right now it's estimated that about 1 billion people worldwide are living in informal urban settlements. And we expect that that number may double by 2030. So we're talking about 2 billion people worldwide that could be living in unplanned urban settlements. And just to give you a sense of what this looks like, so this is an image of Haiti. This is an area, a peri-urban area just outside of Port-au-Prince, and this was taken in January 2010, just before the earthquake that happened in Haiti. This is that same area just 2 years later. So this is 2012. This is now an area called Container, and it is now Haiti's 4th largest city with over 200,000 people living there in a place that 8 years ago, nobody lived. And in these informal expanding settlements around the world, sanitation coverage is estimated to be about 60%. So you imagine 40% of those 1 billion people living in very, very dense urban conditions don't have access to a toilet. And in Haiti, where we work, that number is closer to 90%. So in this community, almost no one would have a toilet. So the dialogue around citywide sanitation has focused really heavily on these existing technologies of either on-site systems or sewers. But there are very compelling reasons that these technologies are not actually going to be able to meet the needs of these growing cities. So this is an image from Kenya, I believe, and I want to talk about what is it about informal settlements that makes traditional sanitation technologies either inappropriate, unsafe, or just impossible, practically impossible. So these are some images from Haiti. I think one of the primary issues is space. So if you have visited an informal settlement in a very big city, you'll see that there just simply is not space between houses. There's no room to put in a pit latrine, to put in a septic tank. And if you did, many of these areas sit in places with very high water tables. When you have a high water table and you dig a pit latrine, you're essentially just allowing that waste to mix with the groundwater, and you're not really solving the public health problem. I do want to ask if we can take a really quick pause and turn off the timings on this. So do you know on the presentation it has a timing setting? Sorry. So I don't know if anyone else has ever had this happen when they're doing a presentation, but PowerPoint sometimes decides that it will decide when to change the slide. And because I usually have to do this talk in 10 minutes, but I get all this freedom today to just chat with you. So I feel like I'll be talking, and then the slides will just be moving on without me otherwise. So I apologize for this little blip, but thank you. And I'll take this moment to say 2 other people that I saw on the webinar, and I was very excited because I particularly with one of them didn't know that she watched webinars, is my mother and my uncle. So I want to say hi, Uncle Chuck. Hi, Mom. I don't know if this is your first webinar, but I am very proud of you if you're on, and that's great. There we go. Thank you so much. Okay. So another issue in informal settlements is that usually these crop up in areas that are very vulnerable, because these are the areas that city planners have not yet moved into. And what that means is these communities are frequently at risk for natural disasters, particularly flooding. And this is a real issue in most of the communities that we work with in Haiti. So if you're living in an area where there's frequent floods, once again, on-site technologies like septic tanks and pit latrines, all of that just floods up and goes into the community. So you may have the toilet, but you're not actually protecting the community from communicable diseases. And then, oh, I think my little picture disappeared. Oh no, it'll come up later. I'm also going to show you a photo from the US, and so just hold on. I'll leave that as a cliffhanger from now. Another issue in informal settlements is that people who move into them are generally renters, and they're not planning to stay there for the long term. So they're very understandably resistant to the idea of investing in any sort of infrastructure, putting in a toilet, a septic tank. And there's that component. And then there's also the fact that because these are informal, unplanned settlements, governments are very resistant to the idea of providing any sort of sanitation infrastructure. They don't want to build latrines, and they're definitely not going to build sewers because that would be legitimizing these unplanned settlements. So what you end up with is a billion people around the world who are living without access to services. Now, water-based toilets like septic tanks and sewers are impractical or impossible in many parts of the world because of lack of access to water. And what you can see here is that all of the founding members of the Container Based Sanitation Alliance are working in parts of the world where there is just not reliable access to water. So in these cases, it's really important to have dry sanitation technologies. And then finally, emptying. So we hear the word on-site sanitation, and I think that's actually quite a misnomer in the sense that to really safely manage an on-site system like a pit latrine or septic tank, it does require emptying. So it's not actually doing everything on site. And the challenge in these dense urban areas is that to actually get in there and empty it, you can't get, you know, a sucker truck in there, it just doesn't fit. And so people frequently end up having to empty them by hand, which is dangerous and risky, and it carries a lot of stigma with it. And then this is the one I said, don't take a photo of this one because these numbers are constantly changing. But we are starting to do some work within the Container Based Sanitation Alliance, looking at the cost effectiveness of container-based sanitation relative to alternative solutions. And these are some really preliminary numbers from Haiti, looking at eco-lacaille as compared to latrines and sewers, and the cost per household per month. And it is looking like they are actually cost effective relative to other approaches. And I'm very excited that in the coming year, we'll be working with Ernst & Young to really do a thorough look at the costs of different sanitation technologies with many of the partners in the Alliance. So stay tuned for these numbers to be updated. I hope they continue to look as good. So now I'm going to tell you a bit about how our process works in Haiti and really give you some visuals from throughout the entire sanitation chain. So beginning with the toilet. And this is our beautiful eco-lacaille toilet. I find it beautiful. I think that one of the things I'm very excited about being here is that we have so many toilet designers here. And right now at Soil, we have two types of toilets. We have a wooden one and we have a ferro cement one, and both are made locally. But I do have a dream that one day we'll be able to have sanitation shops that have all different types of toilets that operate on the same logistical platform, so we can do the service the same way, but people can actually choose a toilet that works for them. And what that would allow us to do is not only offer people a real choice, but set different pricing structures that would ensure that people who could pay more could help to subsidize for those who can't pay the full cost of the service. So the way the toilet looks on the inside is, I'm a little embarrassed, and I know, so I'm excited. I have in the audience today Matthew Lippincott. I actually haven't seen him yet. Where are you, Matthew? I don't have my glasses on. He's back there. But you can see that these are urine diversion toilets, so I am in the right room. And we have two containers. We have a 5-gallon container for receiving the poop, and then we have a 1-gallon container that receives the urine. And then we have this very janky looking urine diverter, which has been this ongoing project forever to redesign our urine diverter to make sure that when you pee, the pee doesn't kind of go through these cracks. And so this is why I said Matthew Lippincott, because we're excited to be working with him on designing a much nicer, but very low cost. I mean, this is the challenging thing. There are great urine diverters out there. I saw an amazing one at Kim's house the other day. But you know, our toilets right now cost between $30 and $50 US to manufacture. And this funnel that we buy costs about $2 to $3 US. And so we need a very low cost urine diverter. And that's the tricky thing, something that's aspirational and cheap. And so Matthew, we're counting on you. So we train local masons to build the toilets, and we really try whenever possible to recruit women from the communities where we work and train them in this construction process. And then we purchase the toilets from them. As everyone in this room knows, instead of flushing with water, we flush with organic material. And what we call it in Haiti is bon odeur, which means good smelling. And it really is, it actually does smell quite nice, I think, because we use sugarcane bagasse, which comes from, as a byproduct of rum manufacturing, and also peanut shells. And we're really branching out and trying to find new agricultural waste products that we can use. And this might be an interesting topic for discussion afterwards, because I think that one of the risks with ecological sanitation is, as it goes to scale, will we be able to find enough agricultural waste to make these systems function? And there are some places where absolutely. I think in Haiti, this is one of the primary risks that we face. And you think about places like sub-Saharan Africa, where there really isn't a lot of organic matter. What do you do in those instances? So I think this is something as a community we really need to be thinking creatively about, and I look forward to some feedback on that. So the way the service works is that customers they choose to have this service. They come to us, they sign a contract and agree to pay a monthly service fee, which is between $2 and $4 US per family per month. And we're very much working towards a place where that service fee would cover the costs of providing the weekly collection. I think that you need to get to a certain scale, and we still have some cost reduction strategies we need to put in place before we get there. But that is the ultimate goal. Oh, that was backwards. Okay. So once people sign up for the service, they can decide to put the toilet anywhere. So some people choose to put it outside in a covered area, and other people don't have much space at all, and they put it right inside the room. And that's one of the amazing things about this toilet. I mean, I had one for years in the bathroom that was maybe 6 feet from my bed. And really, if you use it well and you apply the right amount of cover material and you keep it open so it vents, it actually does smell better than the flush toilets that we had in our house that had some issues. So it really can work within the household. And then what happens is once a week, our team comes around, they collect the full buckets of poop, and they give a clean bucket that has the bon odeur material in it. And we do collection either with modified wheelbarrows in areas where vehicles can't enter, and also with these adapted three-wheeled motorcycles. So, and we're always looking for better transportation techniques too, so I'd be curious what people think of that. After we collect the buckets, we bring them to a transfer station or depot where we store them until we have enough to fill up the soil poop mobile, which is our big flatbed truck that actually transports them out to the compost site. And this is our compost site in northern Haiti. The trucks arrive there and are received by our incredibly badass compost team, you can see here. And so they take the buckets, empty them out of the truck, and then dump them in the bins, all a very simple, low-tech process. Once the bins are full, we cover them with a layer of organic material again to prevent any smells or flies from getting in there. And we actually, on these fresh bins, we have a screen that goes over it, which again is just protection against vectors like flies. I'm really not sure why that image is in there. Okay, well, but we'll come back to that image. It was definitely a little out of place there, but sneaky PowerPoint. So, so then we wash the buckets with a pressure washer. I do want to point out, because I do think this is rather hysterical, we have replaced the motorcycle helmets with some slightly more professional face masks. I have had people say to me, is that a motorcycle helmet? But you know, you work with what you have when you're getting started. So then we sterilize the buckets in chlorine water, set them out in the sun to get a little extra sterilization from the UV light. And with the compost piles, we take the temperature every day for the first 2 weeks to ensure that the temperature is getting higher than 122 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 7 days. And that's the World Health Organization standard for the safe treatment of human waste. So we monitor that to ensure that in these first piles, we're actually killing off all the pathogens. And then after 2 months, we start turning the piles. We turn them 4 to 6 times over the 8-month period of composting. And at the end, we sieve it. And we have this amazing, beautiful compost, which I totally forgot to smuggle into the country this time. And I'm really sorry. I usually, anyway, this is on the internet. I did not bring it. I have nothing in my bag. Okay. Then we test the compost before we bag it. And so we test it for E. coli, which is an indicator pathogen, and is the best that we're able to do right now in Haiti. But we are looking into simpler ways to do Ascaris testing, because Ascaris and other roundworms are the really pesky ones. And we have done this a few times with the Centers for Disease Control. So we are confident that we're killing them, but we would love to have a simple process for doing that testing more regularly. Then we bag up the compost in these beautiful bags. And we've done a lot of testing, so we have a very good sense of what the nutrients are in there, the organic matter, and this is the first compost product in Haiti where we can really show what it is that people are getting in the compost. And the compost is then sold for use in agriculture or in nurseries for tree planting projects. So now I'm going to show you a little video, and just so I can have a drink of water, take a little break, you'll hear some music. Hopefully, maybe. And let's see, Neil. We knew this one was going to be tricky. There we go.
Parce que depuis pour arriver dans cette zone, vous allez marcher, vous allez chercher toilette dans la rue.
Still had the moto helmets.
Ok, ça, on va appeler ces dollars américains. Planter banane, et puis, maïs, papa et tout, on servir avec différentes cultures. Mais ça fait avec cacao, avec la glace. On crée ça plus fertile.
All right. I wish I could just have Al Jazeera make my talks for me. It would be so much easier. So I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly here because I want to get your questions. But I'm quickly going to finish up with talking a little bit about how is it that CBS facilitates fecal sludge management. And fecal sludge management just means transporting human waste without sewers. So how are we getting that poop around? And I think that many of you in this room will know that in 2000, we set these global indicators for sanitation called the Millennium Development Goals. And the Millennium Development Goals were really, the indicator was having access to a toilet. And then in 2015, those were adapted to the Sustainable Development Goals. And that shifted the definition of what it meant to have sanitation to include the entire sanitation chain. So containment, emptying, transport, treatment, and reuse or disposal. And a safely managed sanitation system protects people from exposure all along that sanitation chain. And I think that what's a bit shocking about this is what we always used to hear was 1/3 of the world lacks access to sanitation, 2.5 billion people. Now that was under the Millennium Development Goals. When we shifted to the Sustainable Development Goals, we realized that it was nearly half the world's population who do not have access to a safely managed sanitation system. So we are so much farther from that goal than we originally thought that we were. So really what's happening right now, this image is actually from Haiti. And I talked about it a little earlier, but this idea that on-site sanitation systems do need to be emptied. And what's happening in most of Haiti with pit latrines is that you can't get mechanical emptiers in there, so people actually have to climb into the latrines. It is so unhealthy. It's usually done at night, and it carries tremendous stigma for the people who do it. Now, the difference with container-based sanitation is that collection actually looks like this. So it can be done in broad daylight. It protects the household, the community, and the worker. And it can actually provide very dignified jobs in the sanitation sector. So with water-based systems like septic tanks, you usually have to have trucks get in there, but in many cases, that's not possible in these dense urban areas. Whereas container-based sanitation, we have all sorts of modified transportation techniques to get into very narrow alleyways. And now the photo that came up earlier of the people carrying the buckets up the hill was from Peru. And so that's when you have very hilly terrain that you can't access with a vehicle. You can actually just carry those buckets out. So these are some images from our partners around the world, and you can see that everybody's got their own way of doing it. So we have a lot of flexibility in transport. Another issue that I mentioned before is flooding. So this is a picture of a pit latrine that has been flooded. And you can imagine what's coming out of that pit latrine right now. And this is a picture from Miami after Hurricane Irma. And many of you will remember that the sewer system completely failed. So sewer systems are not made to withstand flooding, and they cannot sustain power outages. All of the pump stations go down, and you end up just flooding the city with waste. So even our very modern sewer systems are not ready to deal with what we're likely facing with climate change. Whereas container-based sanitation has actually proved to be very effective in flooding conditions because we can call our clients and say, cover your containers. Woo! Hopefully that's not broken. Cover your containers, get them out of the water until we can get there and collect them. And this has actually been very effective in Haiti. And we even managed to get the poop mobile in there usually. So finally, I just want to talk about resource recovery, which is what all of us are really excited about. How is it that container-based sanitation makes it even easier to get those nutrients and carbon out of the poop and turn it into resources? So back in the day, with the bucket toilets days in the 19th century, essentially what was happening was they did containment, emptying, transport, and disposal. And there was very rarely any sort of treatment that was happening, and it was very much a linear system. But modern CBS systems have very much been designed with circular economies in mind. So they're designed to think about how can we get the best end product that we can use as a resource. This is an image from the only government waste treatment site in Haiti, and this is a waste stabilization pond where they've been emptying pit latrine waste. What you can see is that, and this is a problem around the world with pit latrines, frequently they exist in areas where there's not good solid waste collection, so people have to use them as a garbage as well. So you end up getting a lot of garbage in those pit latrines, which makes this waste very hard to treat and get the resources out of. We're really excited to be doing some research, and some of our CBS partners also doing research on how can we transform this pit latrine waste, because right now it's breaking the waste stabilization ponds. Liquid waste is heavily diluted with water, which means that you have to dry it before you can get the nutrients out of it. And in the case of sewers and septic tanks, you have household chemicals going in there. With sewers, you have a lot of industrial chemicals. So this makes that waste much harder to clean and turn into a resource. Whereas with container-based sanitation, you've got poop and you've got organic material, which means that that carbon and nitrogen is readily available to be transformed into something valuable. So this is an image from our partner Sanitation in Naivasha, Kenya. And they've found a way to take human poop and turn it into charcoal briquettes. And these briquettes burn longer than traditional charcoal, and also prevent deforestation that would be happening because of cutting down trees. This is an image from our partner Sanergy in Nairobi, Kenya, and they're doing many different types of waste treatment, but one of the ones that's really exciting is cultivating black soldier fly larvae, which are actually an incredible source of animal feed. We have a partner, Luwat, who has had great success with taking human waste and turning it into energy in the form of biogas. They also do other resource recovery, but I think this is very exciting. And then finally, 4 of the members of the CBS Alliance do composting of human waste. So I'm finishing now. I'm going to put 2 questions out there, but we don't have to stick to these questions. I will take questions on anything, but I felt like when I was coming to Vermont, I'm going to do this talk about dense, informal urban settlements. I thought, well, we should also think about rural areas. So for rural areas, are there ways that container-based sanitation can be adapted to rural areas? What sorts of tweaks would we need to make in the system to have something like this work? And then the other question that I'm scared of your questions on is it possible to collect and recycle urine in a way that is financially sustainable? Because let's face it, that is the primary challenge that we're focusing on, is how do we create a system that can financially sustain itself? And let me tell you, urine is bulky, it's heavy, and it costs a lot to move it around cities. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that. And another thing I'm really excited about the work that all of you are doing is that a challenge we have with container-based sanitation is that the ideal toilet in many people's minds is a flush toilet. So this is what people are aspiring towards. And when I visited Kim's house yesterday and I saw her amazing in-home composting toilet in this beautiful house in Vermont, and it smelled so lovely in there, and I thought, now this is incredibly aspirational. And the more that we can do in places like the United States to promote aspirational dry toilet solutions, the more we can shift that global aspiration in a way that's going to make it much easier to do our work. So I'm really excited to see all the technologies that you have, and I think there is a great collaboration happening there. I'm going to end with a scandalous photo of my 4-year-old son that I won't be able to show this for long, but I just want to say, Biko loves the Echolocki toilet. For him, it's very aspirational. And he says, oh, mommy's toilet makes compost. And he's so excited. And I show this because I think that this is where we need to start. We need to start with kids. We need to start educating kids about what's happening with the food we eat after it goes into our body, and get them thinking about the cycle of nutrients early on. And I think that that's going to make our work a lot easier too. So Biko, I'm counting on you, and I will close there and open it up for questions. Thank you.
So if anyone in the room has a question, please start with the front. And the first question people would like to know from online is, where do your customers pour their urine? Where do they put the urine?
Indeed. And I'll say that we certainly don't have full knowledge of this because it is customers who are responsible for that. I think that if there's soil nearby, it can be poured on the soil, but these are very dense areas. So often it goes into a canal. And what we're looking at, what I'm very curious to experiment with, is trying to put community soak-away pits in. So having just gravel pits with a nice pipe and funnel that would at least give people an option to use that. And I'm also very curious. We have biomass controls here. We may have some other biochar people here. I'm curious to think about, is there a way that we could make these soakaways and pack them with something like biochar that absorbs nutrients very well, so that when we pour the urine through it, it actually absorbs a lot of those nutrients and gives us something easier to transport to get the nutrients out. But that was my way of ending the question on a positive note, instead of saying I don't exactly know where it all goes, but it is mostly going into canals and into the soil.
Someone wants to know how long it takes people to fill a bucket. I know you said they come weekly. Do people fill those more often? And
Would you please stand up and speak louder? Mary
Sure.
and I can't hear.
Got it. Okay. So
the question is, can people request a pickup if somebody is sick? Can they? So if someone gets sick in their home and they feel like their feces is more harmful or something, can they request a pickup early? Have you had that experience?
Yeah, yeah, right. Yes, this does happen. I am a client, so I know this happens. So in terms of how long it takes to fill a bucket, our average household size is about 6 people. And usually a family of 5 will fill a bucket in a week. But we have some families that are much bigger than that. So we have some families who will have 2 buckets on hand. And I don't think we have any that fully fill 10 gallons, but I would say it's between 4 and 7 gallons a week is what we expect from a family. And then in terms of sick, can you call for a pickup? I mean, it would be very challenging, particularly as we go to a much larger scale. It would be very hard to do sort of on-call pickups. I think what we encourage people to do is just use extra cover material. And if they have an extra bucket on hand and they want to switch them out, they can also do that.
What is your education and marketing introduction process when you go out to meet people in Haiti and tell them you have this product? How do you start that with family, with people?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting in that, so soil, we started in 2006. And when we started, we did public toilets. We raised donor money, we built public toilets, we transferred ownership over to the community, and these were free toilets. I will say this didn't actually work very well, which is why we've moved to a different approach now. But what it did do is it got people used to the technology, and it gave us a chance to really get to know the communities. So to this point, we've actually not done a lot of extensive marketing. We mostly rely on referral marketing from our customers. So we do offer a referral bonus of half a month's payment to anyone who brings on a new client. And that's been a great way to sort of not only bring new clients on, but bring new clients on in the neighborhoods where we're working, which is important because the density makes it helps our costs a lot. So we do that. We do some door-to-door marketing with our hygiene agents, and they are great promoters. And we've done a couple of community events. We used to do those more than we do now. Now I think we have sort of a critical mass where the referral marketing system is working very well. But something we're really interested in as we try to go to a much larger scale is how can we incorporate local government officials in helping us to find customers, because they are the ones that are getting pressure from their communities to provide sanitation. So how can we work together with them to actually get better access to customers?
have you considered
Using toilets that pre-treat the solids with a technology like a tumbler or a mechanical mixer to accelerate the decomposition and to reduce the pickup frequency?
Did this come from you, Jason Cass? We would consider anything. So we would be happy to test that out, but we haven't tested that ourselves yet.
Can you talk a little bit about how you secured your carbon recover material, getting the resources for that?
Yes, well, as I said, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night is, are we going to run out of the amount of carbon cover material that we need? So right now we get it from people who are making alcohol out of sugarcane. So there's a couple of big factories in northern Haiti that provide that to us. I think the challenge is, as we move into a world of resource scarcity, everyone's starting to understand that there is no such thing as waste. And so people are finding ways to reuse agricultural waste. And if they can find financially beneficial ways to do that, we will lose our free source of that. And so that is a real risk that we're facing. We also get them, there's a lot of peanut butter manufacturing in Haiti, so we get it from that as well.
Can you talk a little bit about the type of support you would have liked to have in the initial stages of building soil?
I mean, I'm very grateful. I feel like I was very lucky so in 2005, they used to have these eco-sand conferences, and I think I went to one of the last ones in South Africa in 2005, and this was before I started Soil, so I had the chance to meet many amazing people who had been doing this work for decades. Among them is my mentor, Peter Morgan, who is just a lovely, lovely scientist who has done a lot of work on this in Zimbabwe and throughout Africa. And so I feel like in terms of having colleagues who could share their experience, we were very rich with that from the beginning. I do think, like all organizations, when you're starting out with a new idea, it's hard to get financial support for them. So I think that would have been wonderful as well. But I think that the wealth of knowledge that we got from our colleagues was really what got us started. None of these were totally new ideas from us. We borrowed them from everyone else.
Someone has asked, where do you currently get your funding to keep going?
So we have an amazing business development director who's been with Soil for 10 years, so as long as I have. And she Leah Jean is her name. She's incredibly savvy, and we have a group of donors, private foundations, some institutional grants who have really stuck with us for a long time. So our biggest donor has been the 11th Hour Project in California. And they saved us when we were about to go out of business and have stuck with us ever since. We also work with the USA Development Innovations Ventures. And then we have a lot of individual donors who provide about 1/5 of our annual budget. Many of them are monthly donors, and that's actually the most important source of income we have, because it provides a reliable and flexible cash flow so that when things happen, like the recent civil unrest and gas price rises in Haiti, that's what allows us to get through that. Because when you have grant funding, it's often very restricted, and it does not sort of build in the possibility of unplanned things like this happening. And one other, the Open Road Alliance is a really interesting new foundation that actually addresses risk. So they are trying to change the philanthropic communities so that they prepare for risks, and they support organizations who have come up against something that you couldn't possibly have predicted. So we have lots of great supporters, and hopefully none of them are listening that I didn't acknowledge, but I love you all.
Someone has asked if there has been any research done to determine if the compost that you then use is contributing to any type of nutrient pollution in the soil, or even absorbed by crops to later be leached back into the system. Have you had any research like that?
We have not, with compost application, we have not looked at any sort of nutrient leaching or gas emissions from that. We are looking very closely at the composting process. So we're working with Rebecca Riles at the University of California, Merced, who's done a lot of research on the climate implications of compost application, and did this great work in California that showed just applying 1/4 inch of compost across the agricultural lands in California would actually offset emissions from cars. So huge potential for carbon sequestration from compost application. And we've also been looking at greenhouse gas emissions from the composting process relative to waste stabilization ponds, and finding, although we have pretty high carbon dioxide emissions, our methane emissions are very low, and overall greenhouse gas impact is much lower from composting than a lot of alternative treatment techniques. So we do hope to get more into looking at whether the actual compost application could be having any negative impacts on the environment. But I would say that the soils that we use it on are so nutrient starved that it's unlikely that you're losing a lot of that.
Another question is, how did you convince your farmers to use this compost? Did they feel confident communicating to the public that they are using this compost that came from transformed human waste?
It's interesting, and I always get that question, and I've had that question very much when we started doing this work. I've been very pleasantly surprised that farmers in general are not particularly concerned about this kind of thing. I mean, they've been using waste to fertilize forever. And we actually found a lot of farmers in Haiti who said, oh yeah, you know, that banana tree out back, that's in our old latrine, and that's the nicest banana tree that we have. So I think for farmers themselves, it's actually, this is not a really a new way of thinking. They understand the value of waste. I do think that it's more people who are farther from the land who have concerns about this. So yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised, but I don't think that the farmers publicly broadcast it so much. So I don't think they say this tomato was grown with poop. That's probably not their marketing technique, but they are comfortable with using it.
Two more questions, and the one is the one you posed yourself, was if soil doesn't use the urine, can you explain why you're not using the urine?
Yeah, so as an ecologist, it bothers me on many levels that we don't use the urine. It bothers me in that it's a lost resource. There is tremendous nutrient potential there. It bothers me in that it is a potential environmental risk, because if you have a city where you've got 10,000 people using container-based toilets and all that urine is going into the groundwater table, that's a risk, and I am cognizant of that. And it bothers me because although minimal relative to feces, there are public health risks that can be associated with urine. So I am just admitting that I am not, this is the part of our system that I would really like to improve. But the reason that we don't collect it is financial and logistical. It is just simply right now to try to get our costs below a point where the service fees would actually cover it is already an incredible challenge. And if we were having to transport, 4 times the volume of what we have right now, at least by transporting the urine, that would have such a huge impact on our costs that it would put us in a place where financial sustainability would be even farther out of reach. So what I'm really excited about all the urine research that's going on right now is can we come up with actually on-site ways of getting those nutrients out of the urine and being able to transport that in some dry form that would be financially feasible.
What is your strategy for growth? And is there a segment of the market that is ripe for soils platform?
Yeah. So I think, although I'm clearly a huge advocate for container-based sanitation and ecological sanitation, I recognize that it's not right for every context. And I think that to achieve universal sanitation, we're going to need a whole menu of sanitation options, and this is just one. I think that CBS is particularly well suited to very dense and areas that are expanding where there's not infrastructure. I think it's particularly well suited to areas where we have flooding. And there is actually a huge market for that. As I said, by 2030, we expect to have 2 billion people living in informal settlements, and sewers are not going to reach these areas. So I think there's a huge market out there. And our strategy for growth right now, I mean, we've spent a long time focusing on the technology and then the service, and where we are right now is thinking about what are sustainable financing mechanisms for growth. And I think the challenge for CBS providers is because this was new, and because we talked about it from the very beginning as a revenue generating opportunity, people immediately got it in their mind that, oh, well, they're selling the compost and they're charging service fees, and therefore this is going to be financially sustainable through the private sector only. And I think we got ourselves backed into a bit of a corner there. And when we first got involved, we were excited about that too. We thought, definitely, we'll make all the money we need. And I think the sector is stepping back now and saying, wait a minute. Having a toilet in your home is a private benefit. And so asking people to pay for a private benefit is very reasonable. Waste treatment is a public benefit. And everywhere in the world where waste treatment is functional, it is because the public sector is involved in subsidizing that. And so the bar that we set for ourselves and has since been set for us was actually too high. And I think that we need to recognize that there are public benefits, and the way to bring this to scale is to use innovative blended finance that combines private sector revenues and also recognizes the need for either philanthropic or public sector financing. And so that's what we're working on right now, and we're working with the Inter-American Development Bank to try to design a mechanism for public finance whereby instead of traditional grant making where you sort of get the money up front and you hope you achieve your results, more of a contract style arrangement where we're paid by providing results. So we're paid either by ton of compost we produce or number of households who have a toilet. We get paid based on those actual results. And that puts in place a mechanism that would eventually lead to government contracts, which is what's worked for the sanitation sector in general. So to get to scale, we have to get that innovative financing in place. And I think we've got a bit of a long road ahead of us, but we're working on it.
So thank you very much, Sasha.
We are very grateful for your time. Thank you to those of you who joined us on the webinar. You can sign off now, and we will have this link to this webinar for those of you who were a little bit late or would like to share it with other people. It will be on our website in the near future. So thank you, Sasha, and thank you all for joining us.